The legend continues. Welcome back to the Sanders Report. I'm Greg. This is Anakin. And if you're enjoying the content we're producing, please consider following that link at patreon.com/SandersPresents and supporting us on Patreon and sponsoring the content that you enjoy. We currently have 2 tiers available on our Patreon, a $3 tier and a $5 tier. At that $5 tier, you truly become legend. Your name is carved into the mythical Nernstone at the base of the tower. And in addition to that, at the $5 tier, you also receive a special Discord channel and you get regular comic drops. I want to thank all of my patrons so much for their support, for sponsoring our content, and for supporting what we do here at the Sanders Report. So we're going to get right up into it. Winding it back to 2006, we're going to first look at Final Fantasy Versus 13. The fantasy based on reality, which was a tagline that stuck through into the rebirth of Final Fantasy Versus 13 into Final Fantasy 15, and something that is carried over now into Kingdom Hearts with ties to the Yozora character. Now, the development history of Versus 13 is long, arduous, and difficult. There is no way to quickly bullet point it for me. That would be a video all on its own, which we might dive into. But suffice to say, Final Fantasy Versus 13 was going to be directed by Tetsuya Nomura. He had a scenario planned. He and his team had worked on it, and that fell apart. And it was when Hajime Tabata took over with Final Fantasy 15, a number of aspects changed, a number of characters changed, the world changed, the lore changed, and it took on a life of its own, and it was no longer connected to the Final Fantasy 13 sort of franchise or sub-franchise, if you will. So that leads us to Tetsuya Nomura holding on to Versus 13. Since 2006, he has held on to Versus 13. He's held on to it for a long time. The first was, the first drop of where he started to tease this was in the original launch of Kingdom Hearts 3 before the DLC and all of that. And that's when the character of Yozora was seen prominently in advertisements in the Toy Story world and for a video game called Verum Rex. And Sora is even mistaken by Rex to be a toy based on Yozora. So then we get the secret movie for the original Kingdom Hearts 3, and Yozora is seen sitting atop a skyscraper, and he's watching streets, the streets below, right? Then we get the Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind DLC, and we get the secret episode where Yozora meets Sora during the night on the final world. So after a brief talk on the reality of the situation and their identities, and Yozora even noting that this isn't what he looks like, which again is another tie to the visual aesthetic design of the Kingdom Hearts universe versus the universe that Yozora came from. Yozora challenges Sora to a fight, and he warps them to a rooftop in Quadradom, which again, phonetically, probably saying it wrong. So now this is what's interesting. There are 2 outcomes to this secret episode. If Yozora wins the fight against Sora, he will crystallize Sora and vows to save Sora. Which again, a character being crystallized also ties back into the Final Fantasy 13 franchise. But if Yozora loses, he'll calmly accept defeat, and he'll state his powers aren't needed yet, and he will vanish. No matter what happens between that, whether he wins or he loses, the episode ends the same. Yozora will wake up in the backseat of a car, accompanied by 2 unnamed allies. And this little scene, this little snippet of a trailer, so to speak, is basically the Final Fantasy Versus 13 reveal trailer. And again, we see the more photorealistic designs. We see the more higher quality, higher fidelity. We see something closer to the Final Fantasy VII remake or the Kingdom Hearts 4 reveal trailer, because again, Sora's now in this world, the design, the aesthetic, all of that's different. So there is a lot within Kingdom Hearts 4, or at least within the opening of Kingdom Hearts 4 and where he's going with this in terms of a spiritual successor, a blending. It's going to be interesting. The question is that I will pose to you: can we look into Final Fantasy Versus 13 to maybe determine aspects of the story things that are going to come from it. Themes of life and death. Again, Quadranum is an afterworld. Again, afterlife, those kind of themes. Sora and Donald are seeking out Hades in that segment of the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer. So we see a lot of this being layered in. And of course, Final Fantasy Versus 13 was also going to, its overt theme was going to be life and death. And it was going to deal with, it was going to deal with death, and it was going to deal with those kind of themes of immortality, of eternity. And you have to just base on it, you know, this is a theme and this is a story that Nomura has not been able to let go of, to the point that it's now kind of a joke. It's now kind of become a meme. But how is he going to make it work for Final, you know, how is he going to make Final Fantasy Versus 13 work for Kingdom Hearts 4 in terms of also the inclusion of Verum Rex, which can then be taken onto its whole separate idea. Yet again, that could just be its own little video topic to speculate on. So all of this, the table is set. Kingdom Hearts Versus 4 kind of became the joke. And it is overt. That's one thing. Nomura is not being subtle about this. He's not being subtle at all. It's very, very upfront. It's very clear, and it is plain as day. So the game will start off in Quadranum. The game will start off in this Versus 13 inspired world. And I have to wonder if this is, because again, it is possible, if this is just, potentially a launch pad for a spin-off series, for another series, for another avenue, of series of games that Nomura wants to explore that won't involve Disney, that Verum Rex taking on its own identity and everything being planted here is just, going to eventually fork off into its own universe, into its own, just like we have Kingdom Hearts, we have Final Fantasy, we have Disney, and we have, Verum Rex, and all of them are within, their own universes, if you will. And if Kingdom Hearts 4 will be used as a launching pad or kind of a backdoor pilot for, Verum Rex to eventually launch and be its own title without any ties to Kingdom Hearts, without any ties to Disney. And will finally allow Nomura to explore his, the sub-franchise in terms of Versus 13 that he was working on. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts and speculation and what you think of all of this. And I want to thank you so much for watching our videos. And again, to my patrons, thank you so much for your sponsorship and your continued support. If you're able, please follow that link in the description below and consider supporting us today. While you're down there in the description, there is also a link to join our amazing Discord community. And finally, my debut novel, 89 Instrument of Destruction, is available to purchase from Amazon. So please check that out. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. It helps immensely with YouTube's analytics and algorithms. And above all else, and most importantly, stay safe, take care of others, and have a legendary day. Bye, everyone.